Good afternoon, brothers and sisters. I'm very grateful to be here. I thank my nature for allowing me to come and speak to you this afternoon. By the grace of God and our ancestors who brought us this far, I'm very blessed to be able to share with you the information which they have graciously given to me. And in my ignorance, I've been blessed to see some kind of light out of the darkness I was in from Hostess Twinkies and other crazy things people do. But what I'm going to talk about is Nutricide, Nutritional Destruction of the Black Race. That's the title of the book I've written. I have a few copies up front, and they won't be back out until the end of the month. So I think I have about 6 with me. That's about it. My daughter is here, and people say we look alike, but I don't know where she is. Naima, where's she at? No telling. She's somewhere doing something for me. So I'm going to talk about the harm that food does specifically to African people. I'm going to talk about the harm that the food does specifically to children, and political purpose of food. Food is used for social and political reasons by the Europeans, or the crazy people, as I call them. We are, as African people, we're orientated to food because we realize this is a spiritual connection between ourselves and God. So we have a spiritual connection to food as African people. And we don't see food as something that can harm us because God has made this. But in the hands of the Europeans, it's a different matter altogether. Food is used for political reasons and for social reasons. I guess you could say it started with Clinton Anderson in 1946 when he said that food is a weapon that we can use to control the populations of the world, like you do a litter of pigs. You pick which ones you want to drown. And the core crazy people have not changed their position with food since that time. They've always used food as a political tool. The reasons why most of their battles stopped is because the armies went hungry and had to stop fighting. But we get this one-sided kind of view from history because most of our historians don't look at the impact of food on us. We only realize the damage that cotton has done to us. But before cotton, there's peanuts. And all these foods were brought into Africa. Peanuts, mangoes, papayas, pineapple from Brazil, bananas from India. All these foods were brought into Africa. And we just assumed that they're African foods because we have not looked at the historical significance of food and how it has moved and changed people all over the world. Now, let me go over some of the history because a lot of us, we major in white studies when we go to elementary school and high school and college, and we're basically taking white studies. So when you take white studies, you don't know your white history, but you have to know your white history because Europeans do not have enough melanin to change, so they always repeat themselves. If you study them once, you never have to study them again in your life, because they do not have enough melanin to change. So to them, history repeats itself. That is a European position. Now, I'm going to go over a few things to let you get an idea of where these words come from that you use. Because when I listen to what you call English, which is mostly just German and vulgar Latin, it is not a language, but they've told you it's a language, but it's mostly German and some vulgar Latin words. Now, let me see. There was a way of fixing meat. Now, there was a shortage of plants and vegetables, as you would call them. Vegetation that you eat that's on the table, you call vegetables. That's vegetation on the table. Let's say vegetables. So, these vegetables were short in Europe because of the Ice Age. So when they got a hold of the vegetables, they made everything taste like vegetables. That's why they always put vegetables on meat. If you want to eat meat, why you want to make it taste like a vegetable? Putting peppers on it, and tomatoes on it, and onions on it. They're making the meat taste like a vegetable because they had a shortage of vegetables in Europe. That's why you call it seasoning, but they had another name for it altogether. Now, I want to describe a meal. Now, they used to, see, if you throw in the desert, they would season the meat with sugar. And the Europeans that went to the desert would season the meat with sugar and salt. And that was called desert meat. You call it desert. Dessert. I'm just trying to tell you where these words come from that you're using. And you call that dessert. But all these are meat terms now. Now, when they used to have their Yule festivals, whenever they slaughtered meat, that was called a Yule. And you call it Yule tide. So when they slaughtered the meat, they would have a Yule, and they would make blood pudding. And they would use the guts of the animals they killed, which is mostly the pigs and the rats and the other vermin, as they call it. And they would take the guts of these animals and make a pie. And they call the guts the humble. And that's where you get the term humble pie from. Because only the poor and the meek ate humble pie. Now let me go over another word that you use all the time. I hear this word and I say, you don't even know where these terms coming from that you're using. They're very primitive. The person that gave out bread, the bread giver, was called a lady. In English, lady means bread giver. That's why they call them ladies. Now, they didn't have enough tools to cut up their meat, so they only had one person that could cut up the meat for them, and that person was called a carver. That's where you get George Washington Carver from, because this person had designation was carver. They didn't have enough tools to cut up meat, so they had one person cut up the meat. That's why today you have on Thanksgiving, you have the father cut up the turkey. Because they didn't have enough tools to cut up the meat. They always pounded with mortar. It was mostly a bunch of mush after they fixed it because they didn't have tools to cut up forks. All that comes from Africa. They didn't have these tools to eat the meat with. So they would pound it into a mush. Of course, they had rotten teeth, but they couldn't chew it anyway. Let me see another one of their little stupid words they use. Oh, these people are really something else. I really don't even like to think of these peasants. Let me just get up. I don't even want to talk about it, really. I really don't want to talk about it. So, their relationship to food is totally different from ours altogether. Food is known as a machine, a commodity. Now, what they do to control the food supply in the world, see, they are not looking at the Japanese as being any power, because 95% of the food they got to get from white people. 1/6 of the world's population eats 1/2 of the food. 1/2 of the total food in this world is eaten by the Europeans. They consume the grain, they give the grain to the cattle, and they waste a lot of food. But 1/2 of the world's food supply is eaten by the Europeans. 4% of the Caucasian people control 95% of the land on this planet. So they're not worried about the Japanese because the Japanese have to buy 95% of their soybeans from them. That's known as the geopolitical structure of the world, which I got into a little bit in African Holistic Health, which I go into further in Nutricide. Now, how this is done is they introduce this food to African people. They introduce it to the farmers. See, in order to produce food, you have to have technology. First technology in producing food is known as the slaves. We were their technology to produce this food, to produce the cotton, to produce the soybeans, to produce the peanuts. We are the technology that further that whole vegetation revolution that was started that you called industrial age, which is mostly plant age, because plants caused them to be what they are today. Now, we were that technology, but in order to get into this food industry, you got to have machines. And if you have machines, they have synthetic fertilizers. Then they boost the growth of the plants by putting hormones in them. And they put the hormones into the animals. So you got to have money to get the machines, you got to have money to get the fertilizers. You can't get into the food industry without this money. So the Europeans use Public Law 480. They said, well, we're going to use Public Law 480, which we call Food for the Hungry program, which the churches use on television. This comes under Public Law 480. They come in and say, we're going to help feed these hungry people. But all the machines and the fertilizers and the equipment is contracted by private industry, not the church, not the federal government. So they say, well, you don't have the money to get this. So what we'll do is we'll lend you the money on a 20-year plan. Okay, but you can pay us back out of your currency. So your African country say, yeah, we want to feed our hungry people. And so we'll buy this machinery from you, we'll buy the fertilizer from you, and that way we can stop feeding the hungry people. But cash crops traditionally have never been consumed by the local people. The food grown in Africa is not consumed by the African people at all. It's consumed by the Europeans. So those are known as cash crops. Your peanuts, your cotton, your rubber, all that's cash crops. And the local people do not eat that food because it costs too much money. So the more they contract their land and lease their land to these private corporations like Perina and Gulf Western, the more they lose control of their diet and the more our ancestors starve. That's why we're starving today. Because starvation is not the fact that you don't have food, it's the fact that you don't have enough money to buy the food. That's why 20 million Americans in this country are dying from starvation every year. There's food all around, but they don't have the money to buy the food. If you're a farmer, you don't have enough money to buy the equipment to grow the food. So you're not even in the market at all. And that's what's going on with the food. But then once you get the food, because it's grown with the hormones, then you're going to get some food so they won't starve to death. But food, see, wait, let me go. I'm trying to get you to think crazy at one point when I'm talking about white people. And then I'm trying to get you to think sane when I'm talking about African people. So let me go back and make you crazy enough to think white enough to be, no, I don't want to. I'll tell you what. The Europeans, in an attempt to put the junk foods into each and every African country, they use what they call the Foreign Agricultural Service. That's when they go into an African country and show them how to make these pancakes. You have all of this bread, that comes out of European culture. I know you're aware of this. They used to eat off the bread and make a flat bread. Let me go back. The reason why they use salt is because they used to preserve their meat in salt. Now, in order to get some of the salt out, the meat was dried and it was salted. So they would boil the meat to make it watery again and soft again. And when they boiled the meat, they would put their beans in the boiling, and then they put the bread in there too, the dough, they would dump it in there. This is how they fix their bread and beans, and that's why they used to salt. That's why you eat salt, because they used to salt the meat to preserve it. But that was a big war fought over salt anyway. You remember during the so-called Civil War when they fought over the Buffalo Lick in Virginia? You all remember that? Okay. Let me go back. Now, the Europeans have divided your brain up. Now, you know you got one whole brain. There's no separation between your left mind and your right mind. And you know that women have a higher left mind function than men. That's why they changed the IQ test, because the women were scoring higher than the boys back in the 50s. So they changed it so the boys would score higher. Then they tell you that the boys are left-minded, but the women were scoring higher than the boys. So they have more left mind function than boys, but they're just telling you the wrong things so they can get you to think wrong. So they want to keep you seized crazy. And look at it. You have a left mind and a right mind. But your left mind cannot function unless the right mind is functioning. They cannot function separately. That's a biochemical impossibility. Now, you have what they call a voluntary brain and an involuntary brain. What the Europeans call the involuntary brain, your subconscious, superconscious, your ear, and all these other weird names. Now you have a voluntary brain that will think about whatever you wanted to think about. If you want to think about math, your brain will think about math. But then you have an involuntary function of your brain will think about whatever's happening. It thinks about that lights on, it thinks about the sounds in the street, it thinks about the bird. It keeps track of everything that's going on, whether you like it or not. And that's the involuntary function of your brain. You have two functions, voluntary and involuntary. But the Europeans divide the thing up and don't let you know that. So I'm getting away from the subconscious, superconscious, and all this sort of thing. I'm just talking African psychology right now for a minute, so you can understand what's going on. Now, the reason why they fix the food the way they fix the food not only comes out of their religion, but it also comes out of superstitions. Now, I know you kind of think, you know, you get up and you eat breakfast, and I'm going to talk about breakfast. The first meal you eat is your breakfast. If you eat your first meal at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that's when you break your fast. That's breakfast. But we got this weird thing that breakfast is in the morning. But when you break your fast, if you break your fast at 5 o'clock, that's breakfast. But somebody has taught you some stupid things here, so it gets kind of difficult for me to talk because I got to go back and erase a lot of the things that we had been taught. The food is combined out of superstitious religious cults, mostly by the homosexuals. Okay. All right. What is he talking about? What planet did he come from? Okay. Look at here. Have you ever wondered why the Europeans are always looking at each other's behind? You realize that a lot of black men and women just go around looking at each other's behind all day. And none of them are selling toilet paper. So you kind of wonder what's going on here. So they usually eat the muscle, the largest muscle of the person. And the largest muscle of the person or the animal is the behind. That's why they eat pig's behind and call it ham, that sort of thing. Put pineapple on it. Because they're trying to regenerate that muscle, and that represents regrowth and regeneration. So you put the fruit on the behind to represent regeneration. If you want to regenerate your higher thinking, you put the fruit in the pig's mouth. That's why they put apple in the pig's mouth. That comes out of their superstitions. So we kind of follow them when we eat. But I'm just trying to say your first meal that you eat is when you break the fast, so that's breakfast. But the thing is, we combining this breakfast wrong anyway, and that's another thing altogether. First of all, understand that your mind has these two different functions, and a food is going to strike your body this way whether you like it or not. A food is either going to be female or male, which we call the Isis principle or the Osiris principle. Those people into the nervous system is going to be the sympathetic nervous system, that we call it Osiris, or the parasympathetic nervous system, which we call Isis. And if you're into the hormone thing, then you know that melatonin is Isis and serotonin is Osiris. Because everything's going to break down on this level like that. You're going to know that calcium is a stimulant and magnesium is a carminative. So calcium is Osiris, magnesium is Isis. All the vitamins and minerals break down this way. Male and female, parasympathetic, sympathetic nerve stimulators. And people that create this food know that. That's why they always keep us on a sympathetic drive. They don't want us to use the female principle. There's a female principle in the male principle, there's a female principle in the female principle. Our ancestors always knew that. That's why an African family structure is structured that way. Like you would have a mother, let's say father, you have a mother, father. Because all the, like myself, my mother and my father, everyone on my father's side is my father. My father's sister is my father's sister. She takes on the responsibility of my father, because she's on the father's side. And my mother's brother is my mother's aunt, uncle, because he takes on the responsibility of my mother. And that's how our families were divided. We didn't have these cousins and all that. That's European foolishness. Everybody was brothers and sisters, and you come in a divine kinship kind of relationship. And so our vitamins and minerals are broken down that way. That's what I'm trying to say. In the African system, our vitamins and minerals are broken down in the family structure. Our hormones come under the family structure. So once you know the family structure, you know all structures. all you have to know is the family. And the only way to know your family is to be attached to your mother, and the only way to be attached to your mother is to be breastfed. Because once you're attached to your mother attaches you to your culture. And once you have that attachment, then everything else is defined for you. Because you only see through the eyes of your culture. You cannot see unless you have your culture to give you the vision to see. Because that's how you learn how to hear. That's how you learn how to eat. And so I'm trying to tell you that the Europeans, through their culture, define how these foods are. And through their culture, these foods are defined by superstitions. And through their culture, that's how we get orientated to food. And that's why we get constipated. That's why we have so many digestive organ diseases. And that's why we have dysfunctional families, we have homosexuals, we have all these things because we're seeing our life through their eyes. And we're seeing the food through their eyes. And we're seeing history through their eyes, which is very bad. So what I'm trying to do is go back a little bit to take you forward. Because every time I hear something, someone comes and asks me something about, have you heard about, what they asked me last year, shark cartilage? I said, yeah. Have you heard about shark cartilage? Shark cartilage can get rid of this and get rid of that. But I said, should I look into this stuff or should I look backwards? Because if I'm talking about a European, I might as well look back rather than look forward. So I just looked backwards and I found out where they were using it before. Because it used to be strigo when they used it before. They used to use strigo to season things. That was a whale's intestines. They would let it ferment and rot. And they'd take that pus from that and use that to season their meat. It was a delicacy. I mean, why are you looking like that? You don't know what good food is. Look. There is a thing that goes on here, as I mentioned before. We have a spiritual connection to our food, and you must understand that. We do not look at food as a slave to serve us. You take the vitamins and minerals. You take this food and you eat it. You cannot take anything that God makes. You can only share in it. And so our ancestors honestly knew that from the beginning. But the Europeans have you looking at food like it's supposed to do something for you. The food cannot do anything for you. You do everything to the food. You put it in your mouth, you chew it. Your muscle push it down your teeth. You're doing everything to the food. The food is not doing anything to you. You cannot eat vitamin A and get vitamin A from a carrot. That's impossible. You cannot eat a carrot and become half carrot, half human. All you do is eat the carrot, and the carrot stimulates the vitamin A already present in the system. All the baby does is drinks his mother's milk from the breast, and the mother's milk stimulates the immunity already in the baby. But if you've been taking white studies, you think you can take this, you can take that, and you divide, you conquer, and all this stuff. It doesn't work that way in nature. It doesn't work that way. But most of us don't know when we're being insulted. That's the problem. We really don't know when we're being insulted. Look at you. You're trying to get something in your system. You're trying to get some nourishment in your system. You're eating and you're having digestive problems. So now, you're going into European superstitions. But remember, the motto, the theme of allopathic doctors, MD doctors, is contrary cures the opposite. So if you're going north, it's going to tell you to go south. So if you're having problems with digestion, they're going to give you something to stop the digestion. You need the digestive fluids to break down the food. And what they're going to give you? An antacid to stop what your body's trying to do. Because you're going this way, and they believe contrary cures opposite. So they're going to send you the direct opposite way. You're innocent. You go to the doctor, you say, look, I got a cold, and he says, I'm going to give you an antibiotic. Now, wait a minute. Biology means living things. Now, I'm alive, I want to take something alive, and this man's going to give me something anti-life. And you're going to take it. That's the part that gets me. Why do we keep going for this? And in any case, it gets worse than this. It really does. I was looking at it. I almost got ran out of one town I was in, but that happens a lot with me anyway. I was somewhere and I was telling them that white sugar is a pork sweetener because they use pork to make white sugar. And then I said, Assalamu alaikum, because they make these bean pies with this pork in it. And then they all say, the minister and all these things they say to you. And I said, look, in the processing of white sugar, they use the blood of a pig. So you're using a pork sweetener to make this bean pie. And the only way they can make it calcium enriched is they buy the bones from the slaughterhouse and grind them up and put them in the bleach white flour to make it enriched. So now you got pork bones in the flour, pork bones. I said, Assalamu alaikum. Yeah. And so the people, they get all kind of upset about certain things. But nonetheless, it's just insidious because we're following these people who go the direct opposite of what you're trying to do. Direct opposite you follow. Now you understand, when they used to travel on the ships, they used to carry their food supply with them. Now first they would carry the rats, then they would have the cats, and then they would have the dogs. The scraps would fall down and the rats would eat that, and then the cats would eat what's left and the dogs would eat that. And as they progressed across the ocean, we're busting those hulls, chains, they run out of food, then they eat the dogs. Then they run out of dogs, then they eat the cats. Then they run out of cats, and then they eat the rats. They've always eaten rats. They just stopped eating them, and now they don't know what to do with them. And I always say, you know what to do with them. They act like, they haven't been eating them all this time. But I know their history. They like rats. They dress, the most expensive coat you can get is a coat made from rat fur. A mink is a rat. So I look at them with their little rat fur and, all kinds of stuff. Talk to me. Nonetheless, they carried that food supply with them. But if you don't know their history, you don't really know what's going on with this food. You really don't know what's going on with this. There's an illogical combination of way they combine food. Remember I was telling you how they would fix their meat? It was salted. See, they had a shortage of vegetables, so they would make their meat into their dessert. They would make their meat into their vegetable. They would make their meat into everything that they needed with the few vegetables that they had. The only one they really had a lot of was saffron. And until the potato was introduced to them by Sir Walter Raleigh. They wouldn't eat the potato when that was introduced, by the way. The reason why they got into eating white potatoes is the queen figured that the only way she could get they gave the potato, but they were superstitious and wouldn't eat it. Because they were still eating into... we'll go into that homosexual thing. Look, you know what they named food after the behind. They got the buns, Then they got the honey buns, Honey buns, when you mix the semen with the bowel movement, that's the honey buns. And they used to call that honey when it oozed out the behind. But nonetheless, I don't even want to get into this. But all I'm trying to say is, how they were superstitious and they didn't want to eat the potatoes. So what they did was they put guards around the potato patch until the potatoes got ripe. And then when the potatoes got ripe, they removed the guards. And then they went into the field and took the potatoes. And that's how they got the Europeans to eat potatoes. See, they thought that, when, I don't even get into that. Because they thought that the potato was a sex stimulant anyway. Because it looked like a bowel. You don't even want to know that.
No, I don't.
Look, let me do some scientific stuff here. I want to show you that your involuntary brain is functioning all the time, whether you like it or not. And I want to let you know that food is sold by Sex in America. Sex sells toothpaste, all these little oral sex in your, connotations. This toothpaste gives your mouth sex appeal. I mean, please, that is obvious oral sex. So they use all this sex to sell the food. They sell toothpaste with sex, cars with sex, toilet paper with sex. These folks are saying. And you look at the commercials, and you say, well, ain't nothing going, ain't no sex in that commercial. But see, your involuntary brain registers it. When they take that little candy bar, See, they shape the food like sex organs too. That's another stuff. You know, they got these little penis-shaped candy bars. Then they break the candy bar, and then that stuff oozes out of it. You know. Yeah. Then they got the vagina-shaped pizza, and then they had this white cheese oozing out of it. I mean, by the time the kids finish looking at the commercials in the morning, they start at 8 o'clock. By 12 o'clock, they're going to rate themselves or rate somebody else. When you rate yourself, they call that masturbation, by the way. It goes into some part of the white Masonic initiations that J. Edgar Hoover and all this George Washington did. Nonetheless, I'm just saying all these sexual connotations, all explosions, whether somebody's head gets blown off, arm gets blown off, all that is symbolic of orgasm. That's why the children be laughing when somebody's head gets blown off. And you say, what's wrong with these kids? Aside from being addicted to the hormones and addicted to the sugar, they're born addicted to these substances, by the way. You can always tell when a child is born addicted. Now, a child has, the nervous system is kind of destroyed, basically, by the speeds, by the stimulants, because it rushes the nervous system up and the growth up past its normal rhythm. And that causes you reach a threshold too quick and then it burns out. And so the nervous system never really completes itself. So they're damaged biochemically and electromagnetically when they're born. And you can tell that. See, if you go to pick up a baby these days, and you pick up the baby too fast and they stiff their legs, that's known as the defense reaction of the child. Because their system can't take that much stimulation. Or they may do their arms like that, that's a defense reaction. Or they splay their fingers, that's a defense. Or do this like this. If you look them in the eye, they can't look in your eye too long. You have to do eye aversion because you're overstimulating their system. You say, why can't you look me in the eye when I talk to you? They can't do it. It's a biochemical impossibility. And then you beat them up for being damaged by the food in which you've given them. But you can always tell when they're damaged like that because they can't sleep on their back. You have to put them on their stomach or on their side because that's too much stress putting them on their back. You pick them up and they stiffen their legs. That's known as addictive response. There's too much stimulation at one time. They do the eye aversion, you pick them up, they roll their eyes when you pick them up. That's another sign of an addicted child. See, you punish the children, you call it learning disorders and all that kind of stuff, but it's all because of these Europeans. They are basically destroying us with their so-called foods, which is mostly just synthetic foods. We are not eating foods. People going around have never drank a glass of water in their life. Let me show you about these sexiness commercials here. Because I know you all are so innocent about this. You know, you don't really see what's going on here. You do not see the sex hidden in the ice cubes. You do not see the fish. You do not see the penis. You do not see the man having sex with the dog. You do not see any of this, but your involuntary brain registers the image. Registers the image, whether you like it or not. 2 ice cubes in a glass with a straw. Can I be any more obvious? 2 testicles in a penis. And then you see the woman's lips on the straw. The lips represent the vagina. Oh, yes, it does. These folks know exactly what they're doing and know exactly what buttons to push, but you're sitting around so naive while kids are being ambushed by them. There are 6 million prescriptions written, new prescriptions written for Ritalin every year. 90% of them are taken by African children. Ritalin causes cancer, cysts, and tumors. They are being damaged. And people go around, you know, I get around these people, they give me this little rap about, you know, our ancestors, they got off the spiritual trail here. They did some spiritual things wrong, and that's why Africa fell. Yeah, okay, they at fault. Now you at default, because you letting this happen. What's your excuse? I don't play that victimize my ancestor rap that I hear. Because people in the midst of change are supposed to change. The Europeans had no right to mess with our people while they're changing. So they're changing. So what's wrong with that? So we have tribalism. This group doesn't mess with that. We never mess with each other, even on the continent. There's nothing wrong with that. But here, this is the sexual symbolism that's hidden in there. But I'm going to show you your third eye. A lot of people don't know where the two are, but I'm going to show you your third. This is the electromagnetic vibratory force that sits in the center of your brain right there. That's what the Europeans and the Indian people call the third eye. That sits over top of your pineal gland. Every time, right here. It's not the galaxies, not any of that. Sits there, it hovers, and like that. And every time Mercury moves, one of those little granules in there moves. I don't know whether it moves first or Mercury moves second. I don't know which way it goes. But all the energy gets fed into that, and then it goes into your pineal gland. See, the substance inside of your pineal gland doesn't die. The ancestors used to put it in a little tube, a vial, and they call that your relics. That's when they collect your relics. Because the melanin doesn't die. And that's what they call the solitons in physics. You have electrons and protons and neutrons. This is a soliton. This is above all of that little petty stuff that the Europeans are talking about. Okay, so we looked at the third ventricle, which is where your pineal gland sits at, and your hypothalamus, and all that sort of thing. I'm going to show you that these health food people, they are not any different from anybody else. They're still white people. You know, you have the white Arab nationalists who are white first, Muslim second. Then you have the white Christians who are white first, Christian second, and the white Jews, whatever that is. Now, this is a book you can get in health food stores. It's a natural book. Now, do I have to tell you which one is the vagina and which one represents the testicles? Is it kind of obvious now? They use the symbolism to stimulate you, to get you sexually attached to the foods. Now there's a sexual connotation to the food that you're eating, to the McDonald's burgers. Because you think the lettuce is put on the burger for some nutritional reason. Nutrition comes out of the amulet of Manet, which is a symbol of it, and the word menu means nutrition. It's an Egyptian word, menu, Manet, Mina, menu. Whenever you see it, just think back, that's an African word. So all this science of nutrition comes out of Africa. It doesn't come out of those caves, where the cavies come from. It doesn't. This is our science. This is their symbolism. So they orientate us with their symbolism so we can become sexually attached to the food. So the children become chemically attached to the food, biochemically addicted to the food, and sexually addicted to the food. And now they're addicted to the music. The music causes addiction to the food. The music feeds into what we call the limbic system. The limbic system is a system inside of your brain that lets you feel good about yourself. Good about yourself, and that means you feel good about your culture, good about being African. But once they destroy your ability to feel good about yourself, they have basically destroyed you. And how the limbic system sits in back of your arc here on your nose. It's right back there. And it has a little patch of hair in it. And it feeds in through, well, let me go back. I showed you the third ventricle with the third eye in it. It sits over top of your pineal gland. Your pineal gland makes a hormone called serotonin, melatonin. It makes your skin black. This is melanin. And the melanin in your eyes lets you see a full range of color. That's why your eyes are brown. Europeans don't have melanin in their eyes, so you look in their eyes and you see the veins, and the veins are blue and gray, and that's why their eyes are that color. You're looking at their veins. The melanin in your ears lets you hear more sound than any other race. All this melanin is in your nervous system. It causes you to transmit, store information more than any other race. If you want to see how to design a computer, you look at the melanin chips because they crystallize different from any other form in your body. See, the only science there really is melanin. The only thing you can really study is melanin. When you take biology, you study melanin, but they never tell you that. I mean, how can you take biology and get a degree in it and don't know the word melanin when melanin makes the nucleus of the cell that operates your body? The nucleus is melanin. Then you want to study how the melanin moves through time and space, so you take chemistry. And the word chemi means black, so you study melanin again. So you got these people who've been studying with the Europeans, they're called crazy people, studying melanin all this time and never even heard the word. So what have they been studying? The superstitions of the Europeans. That's all they study. They're masters of superstitions and rituals, which they call science. But the only science is melanin. Don't let anyone fool you. That's the only thing you can study. That's what operates this thing called vitamins and minerals. It operates on that principle. The male and female spin of the melanin crystal, which I just showed you. I ain't gonna show you no more. Now I'm gonna sexually stimulate you. You just don't get it. The kids get it, but you're not getting it. You don't see the penis in the vagina, which is the spoon. You don't see that. You don't get it. You don't see the... Have you ever wondered why they always had these designs in the white girl's fur? All this kind of hidden symbolism in their hair design, all those animals, bestiality, sexual... Okay, let me go back. Look at here. Biochemically, you have hair, because your hair has more color bands in it than any other animal on this planet, because we were never in the animal kingdom. We were in the human kingdom in African science. The Europeans have never told you anything other than they are animal. And you don't want to believe it. They tell you they're in the animal kingdom. They never said they were in the human kingdom. You just assume that they're human beings and you treat them that way. But they have never told you anything other than they're animals, and they relate to monkeys. And you know it. In any case, you look at your hair, and the color bands break down, and it's more than the wolf and the dog. So you have hair. You look at the Europeans' hair, and it breaks down the same as a dog. So by definition, you have hair. They have fur. I just wanted to tell you that. You look at me like, what's he talking about? I'm talking about, you know, I know when I'm talking about animals and when I'm talking about human beings. Now, I'm going to show you some drugs that have been imported into Africa since 1950. That boy Borden first condensed the milk. The Portuguese brought the spam, the pig, in. Oh yes, I guess this looks good to some people. My mouth is watering with this, I'm very sorry. But all of this is chemicals. That white flour is not a food by definition. It is a drug. That oil has been deodorized. It has been winterized with antifreeze, so it won't get cloudy when you put it in the refrigerator, so they add this antifreeze to it. It has been bleached. So, well, lye, mind you. So it's not a food. It is a processed chemical, and you call it oil. But the thing is, this Borden condensed the milk, which that didn't work too well, so they let Pasteur and those guys go, who were basically chemists, pasteurize it. Then we have the little ham here. The little, you know, they used to wrap their meat in this pork. Remember, they just started going into beef, basically. When they started this beef thing, around 1870 they started, and then around 1920 the Europeans really got into beef. Before that they were into pig, because it takes 7 pounds of vegetable protein to make 1 pound of pork protein, 20 pounds of vegetable protein to make 1 pound of beef protein, so it's cheaper to make pork than to make beef. So they basically stayed with the pork. But you know, the worms that are in the pork and the worms that are in the beef, you can't kill them with heat, so the worms just kind of like cast out through your skin and give you the little white heads and black heads. I mean, if I was going to get a head, it'd be black head, because I'm racist. But a lot of black people got these white heads on them and everything. And all this basically is just worms coming out of the skin from these chemicals they use. But see, they used to wrap the meat in, you remember when at the amphitheaters in Rome and Greece, they had what they call, the emperor would give them a sportula. The sportula is like a basket, and this, well, you call it sport. That's where the word sport comes from. It's a basket of meat. Sportula, you used to call it. And they would go there for sport. And the Greeks say, I'm going for sport. And they would go into the amphitheater arenas, or gymnasiums, as you call them, for sport. And that's where you get the word sport. It's the designation for a meat that's wrapped like a sheet, and you wrap the meat inside of it. And they used to carry a biscuit with them. Biscuit is a French word for baked twice. And the biscuits, they used to bake the bread, which was made with pine bark and ginger and salt. If you were lucky, salt and sugar, but most of the time they didn't have salt and sugar. They usually had pine bark, which they ground up, what you call sawdust, mixed that in with the flour, and then baked the bread twice, because the French word for bake twice is biscuit. And then they would carry the biscuit up into a year and just eat off of it. And then the weevil would get in the biscuit and lay these little eggs that come out like a yogurt. And so they would eat the biscuit with the worms and the eggs in it. That's why they like to put this cream on the biscuit, the butter. They like it because it resembles in their mind the worms they used to eat on the biscuit. Then they would take the biscuit. They make the bread with the pine bark. They ground it up, mix it with the flour, dump it in the water. No, they used to fry the bread because they didn't have wheat. They originally had barley, because barley grows in a short time frame and wheat takes pastures, and they didn't have that in Europe. So they would take the barley, grind it up, mix it with the sawdust, and fry it. But if they didn't eat it while it was hot, it would get too hard. And since they didn't have teeth to eat, because 90% of them have rotten teeth, they still have it today, as you know. And if you eat like them, you're going to have rotten teeth like them. So they would eat that before it got hard. So they would take the bread and heat it up, toast it, they called it, and put it in beer and wine because the water was too polluted for them to drink. They only believed the fresh water came from the Thyme River, which was basically polluted. So they would put the bread in the wine or beer, the toast. And that's where they get the word toast from, because they used to put the bread in it and then they would drink it after it dissolved, and they said, let's have a toast. And that's why you say toast today. You make a toast or something like that. That's where it comes from. That's what I'm trying to tell you, some of the history. But it's really sickening. But they used to toast the bread and put it in the wine, and the bread dissolved, and they're drinking. They say, let's have a toast. And they drink it like that. Because they didn't believe in the water. Of course, you know they didn't bathe anyway. You know King Henry VII didn't bathe. The Europeans didn't believe. They used to take grease baths. You remember that? They never changed the underwear their entire life. They would take a bath but leave the drawers on. And then they rub the grease on the underwear to protect them from insects and mosquitoes. That's where you get this thing called oilcloth from. They used to rub the grease on the cloth and use that. Before they had these plastic tablecloths, they had oilcloths. That used to be grease cloths. And they used to rub the animal grease on the cloth and eat on top of that. You don't remember that? Do you know why they season their food? They're trying to imitate this taste because they didn't have bottles. They used to use the skin of the dogs and the cats to put their liquids in. And they put grease all around it, and the grease would get rotten and leak into their food. And so to imitate that taste, they came up with this A1 sauce and all these sauces that you put on there because they're used to the rotten taste. And it comes from the way they used to store their food.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How you get all your knowledge about what they did?
You can get all my knowledge about what they did. You can read it in a book, if you like. Why don't you get Susan George's book, How the Other Half Dies. White girl, racist, but she wrote it. Or you can get our Richie's book, Food and Civilization. Get it at the library. Do not buy these books. It's a waste of time. Food and Civilization by R. Ritchie. Or you can get Susan George's book, How the Other Half Dies. But I, for one, do not recommend that you get any of their books. Waste of time. This picture is sexually stimulating because toys are sold by sex in this country. You just don't get it. I'm not even going to explain it. If there are some children in the room, you're not getting it. You ever wonder why people go on these diets and can't even stick to them?
Oh, let me show you. It's because they have an eating disorder. An eating disorder is maintained by the health food industry and by the junk food industry. People are chewing all the time. People are chewing all the time. And they want you to chew all the time because every time you put something in their mouth, in your mouth, you're putting some money in their pocket. So they want you to chew all the time. Chew some chewing gum, chew some cake, chew some candy. Put something in your mouth, take the money out your pocket and put it in their pocket. So they maintain an eating disorder, which you call eating a snack. No animals eat a snack. You have never seen a lion eat a deer and stop off and eat some chips. Why would you want to do it? You just ate a watermelon. Why would you stop and drink a soda? You just ate some papaya or some mango. Why would you stop and drink some soda? You've eaten a full meal. The snack thing is another word for eating disorder, which is maintained in this country. Because the chemicals in the food are addicting, the nitrates, the salt, and the hormones. They are chemicals, these synthetic chemicals, all of them are addictive. And the only way a chemical can work is by destroying the melanin. The key to this thing is the melanin. You don't know anything else, you've got to know that one. The only way a drug can work is by attacking the melanin. That's how Prozac works, it inhibits melanin reuptake. This is how these drugs work. They have to destroy your ability to be blind. That's what I'm trying to say. Or they're not a drug at all. Now, an eating disorder is a person who is not aware, they distort their body image. You know, like a person say, I really wear size 7, but a 9 feels so good. Because they're squeezing their foot in these small shoes. They put on clothes that are too small because they think they're small, but they're not. Because they have a distorted idea of their body. They talk about their body like it's a car or something of that sort. Because they have this relationship, they have bonded, but they never bonded with their mother, which forces them to bond with the European culture. They don't bond with their own culture, so they don't see food the way the African sees food anymore. People talk about food like it's a relative. Have you seen the Bigfoot? Did you bring Bigfoot with you? Where's the Bigfoot going to sit? We're going to put the Bigfoot over here. Yeah. Call up, make sure she fits Bigfoot all right. You know, they be calling up each other about this food. And making sure the food has a nice place at the table. I said, what's going on here? And you can absolutely get hurt with people who are jonesing on their food. When they're crashing off their sugar, they get agitated and irritable. I mean, I'm very cautious around my own brother because he almost forked me to death. I was reaching for a biscuit before he could reach for it, and he went down with the fork. You know, I was scared, you know. But now when I talk to him, I say, "How you doing? You want to stop off and make doo-doo? Get something? You know, I know he needs his Jones." And then he goes to Big Doo-Doo and the Belching King or Burping King, whatever you call him, and the Dairy Queer. He goes to the places. So they have a distorted image of their body. They have no sense of their body's boundaries. They are depressed. See, they medicate themselves with food. When they get happy to eat, when they get depressed to eat, when they get worried to eat. They medicate themselves with food because they have an eating disorder. And the junk food industry maintains that. And the health food industry maintains that. They want you to take the money out of your pocket and put it in their pocket. And they have people chemically addicted to these foods. So, look, they don't know when they're hungry. They just eat. I know people got food in their car, in the glove compartment, food in their zip, food in their pocket, food in their, handbag. Some people have food in the bathroom. I'm not kidding. I've seen people sit down, go in the bathroom, and eat a candy bar sitting on the toilet. Really? People are so constipated because they never give the food a chance to leave their stomach or their small intestines. So the food is just backing up, and they're getting constipated, and their breath smells, and then they try to make their mouth drunk with some mouthwash. The mouthwash doesn't stop the bad breath. It's just when you move around, the food starts moving down, and that stops the bad breath. So the person's constipated, their breath stings, then they coat their tongue with this plaque because the bowel movement is just caking up in their body and ends up with this white stuff on your teeth. And then they brush up 1 inch of white stuff off, leaving 35 feet of it in their body. Smart. So they constipated. The constipations come out of their skin and they call it dandruff. Come out of their pores of their skin and they call it bumps, pimples. Then it backs up into their eyes and they call it glaucoma, cataracts. Then the mucus tries to throw out of their system because they don't realize that they catch the cold the minute they drink the soda. And when you start coughing and your nose is running, that's when you're getting rid of the cold. See, we've been trained by some backwards, primitive cave people who are still attached to the ice age. That's why they eat them ice cubes all the time, watching that ice skating and all that kind of ice stuff. They're still in the ice age, and you don't get it. Oh, let me tell you something. Now, the person's all constipated, they have a bowel movement. Instead of it floating, the thing sinks and flushes the toilet on its own. They got to go into the bathroom with an Essence, last year's, and read up to this month. Jet, Ebony, a VCR, all of this stuff. It's going to take them a while to get some of this crap out. People leave the house. Something died in there, they say. Something died in there when they have a bowel movement. Anyway, I'm not even going to talk about it. Anyway, they don't have a sense of when they're hungry because they're constantly eating, constantly feeding their addiction. They go through the whole day. I say, have you drank any water? Oh, don't even know when they're thirsty. Now, that is someone not attached to their own body. That is a spiritual kind of disease. Someone is doing some spiritual warfare on you. Designing food to look like vaginas and things with their little Cheerios. Look, they put less than 10 cents worth of sugar to coat this cereal, and then they charge you $250 a pound to buy the same sugar. That's the markup. That is the markup. Do you realize that you can buy half a bushel of corn for $3? And then you go to the store and buy some box of cornflakes that's a half of an ear of corn. And you're paying all this money for it. You're buying a 30 cents worth of corn and you're paying $250 a pound for it. It's a tremendous markup. How can you ask these white boys and these white girls to give this up? They got you eating jelly sandwiches. I mean, I'm educated. Jelly sandwiches, excuse me. Look, they got you eating them jelly sandwiches. Look, the white boys say, I can get them to eat this. I'll cut a half of a slice of bread and flatten it out and put some jelly in it and call it a pop fart. Now, look at him. This guy has sold you half of a slice of bread. Really? The markup is so tremendous with this junk food that how can they give it up? They're not selling you anything. The box has more nutritional value than the stuff in it. You're better off eating the box. But nonetheless, they put the chemicals in the food. Now, you can really get off of these addictions now. There's a regimen for it, you know, that sort of thing. It's basically the same kind of regimen. When I'm dealing with addictions, it's always the same because I have to unblock the nerve endings because the nerve endings get blocked by THQ. So it's a synthetic kind of chemical that gets inside your nerves that stops you from receiving the message because it blocks your reception. The receptor sites are all clogged up. So like smoking marijuana, it kills the 11th allele. It kills part of that gene permanently. See, people forget that once you put the match to tobacco, you've created a chemical. Once you put the match to the marijuana, you have made a chemical. Marijuana should be drank as tea. But once you put that fire to it, you're in chemistry now. Now you're in the white boys ballpark. Now you're dealing with something dead. Yes, ma'am.
You said that they're poisoning African people, but they eat all those things too, so don't they care that they're poisoning themselves?
Good. I mean, that's too bad. I mean, they shouldn't really do that. No. They are doing it for a different reason. Their relationship to the food is totally different from our relationship to the food, and they do not have the right to poison us. That's all right for them to poison each other. But once they step over that line, see, they don't know the boundaries where their culture ends and where our culture begins. That is the big, where our culture begins is where violence begins. If we cannot violently maintain our position, then they don't respect our position. Because the medium of exchange with Europeans is violence, not spirituality. But in any case, the addiction can be broken, but you have to clean the nerve endings out. You have to get that synthetic chemical out of the nerve ending. So sometimes we have to go into the system. Basically, I'm just trying to say, if you eat whole foods, raw as possible, don't even worry about anything I'm saying. Just forget about everything. Eat raw food, you're all right. You don't have to know all this stuff about calories and cholesterol and all this foolishness that the Europeans are preaching. You eat your food as raw as possible, that's nutrition. You eat live foods, you stay alive. When you start getting into these chemicals, this bleached white flour, all this white stuff, you're in trouble. White flour, white sugar, white salt. Because they bleach the sugar. That's bleached white sugar. They bleach the flour. And salt is a chemical. Whether it comes from the sea or wherever it comes from, sodium chloride is a chemical. Don't eat it. It's going to create a state in the land, in other words. So we try to free up this nerve endings. We use something like amino acid, like phenylalanine. We're going to stimulate the melanin production. We may use some raw grape juice, some bananas, some plantains, some pumpkin seeds. All these have tryptophan in it, by the way, sunflower seeds, all that. And we're trying to stimulate the melanin production. You can either stimulate an illness to be a person to be healthy, you can go Osiris Isis. If you go Isis too far, it's going to always kick back into Osiris. It's like driving a car. You go this way, and then when you want to adjust the wheel, you got to go back this way. And the body does the same thing. They try to get rid of the illness this way, and it doesn't work. Come back this way to get the system balanced. Because it's going to use you're going to use both hands, both directions, and cause this cleansing to occur. So some people just go the opposite way. They'll go this way. If you have something wrong with your liver, you can go through your kidney and your pancreas, or you can go through your large intestines and lungs. Because it's going to work in a trinity. Either way you're going to go, you can approach the liver from an Osiris position or Isis position. You can go from your pancreas to your kidney to your liver, or from your large intestines and lungs to your liver. So some people go into these other people, they go to this healer and that healer and say, he gave me that, this one gave me that. Which one should I follow? They don't understand that the healer works by his personality and his talent. So you're comparing Anita Baker with Whitney Houston, or whatever. Whitney Houston. Yeah, I mean, they both have talents. I mean, what's going on here? You either like one or you like the other. So there's no need of comparing. Are both of those ladies still straightening their hair? I don't remember. You know, I see these brothers, they be talking about sisters straightening their hair. You know what? See, the white boy, he can have a part in his hair because his hair is long. So he part his hair and go this way and that way, so he gets a part. Then I see brothers ain't got no long hair, and they shave a part in their head. Following the white man. And I see some brothers that got 3 masters, a part here, part there, part there. Oh, man. We've been around this guy too long. But in any case, I'm just saying there's some nutritional treatments for it. I just want to show you how the nerve receptor sites get blocked here. When I was telling you about the limbic system, that you feel good about yourself, see, that system gets inhibited. It gets blocked by these substances here, which are in alcohol, sugar, all those synthetic chemicals have them in it. It blocks the receptor site. It's sort of like the rebounding effect that you get from sound. You know, each one of us hear different. I mean, your ear does not look like my ear. Now, if I put your ear on my head, I won't be able to hear too well. Because God made this ear so I could hear, because it knows how to convolute the sound and rebound the sound out. That's why your ear works for you, but it won't work for me. I mean, have you ever wondered why everybody's ear looks different? What you think? God said, oops. No, this is all done on purpose here. So the sound has to rebound out, but when you stop the rebounding effect of the sound, it causes a retrogressive chemical reaction, which blocks this receptor site. What I'm trying to say, without all the scientific jargon, is the Walkman is walking more than what he's walking. He's walking into your ability to feel good about yourself because it's stopping the rebound effect of the sound, which causes a chemical reaction. Beware of any gift that this white boy gives you. If he gives you education, it's going to destroy you. Ask Carter G. Woodson about it. If he gives you $1, it's going to destroy you. Because his dollar supports his system. One God, one country, one aim, one currency. We don't need his dollar. So if you use his dollar, you're supporting his system. But that's going into some other things. But I'm just trying to get you a little more aware that this is a business, and we are the best business they are. Now look, how they do this thing is very interesting. You remember back in the 60s, people were saying black and proud, and that was when James Brown had an afro, and now I think he got a white girl. But I remember he had an afro then. See, what happened was the food industry came into the African American public school system, along with the psychiatrists. See, they used to have about 3,000 psychiatrists in our public schools. But after the 60s, they said, we're going to get them. And they brought in 20,000 psychologists with this new philosophy to feed to our children about lifestyle choice. I mean, if you masturbate, that's your choice. If you're homosexual, that's your choice. And if you take drugs legal or not legal, that's your choice. And they taught this whole new choice philosophy in the public school system to our children. And since they brought in the comprehensive mental health systems and this nutrition program of theirs and all this new philosophies, suicide has went up 300%. Violence has went up. Because we're functioning under somebody else's principles now. So, I will show you some of these people that do this. I'll show you the little chart here. But they allegedly are helping you, you see. But since they brought in this whole system, it's destroyed us. The dairy industry, well, we know that cow's milk is not a good. You know that a baby's, African child's mouth cannot fit the cow's tit. It's physically impossible for you to drink cow's milk. Not unless you get on all fours, a grown man, get on all fours, crawl underneath a cow, and suck on his tit. Now that is crazy even to even think about, and crazier to watch. And I pray that the cow farts on it. The introduction of this whole thing has destroyed us. The dairy industry has insidiously done this. Now they're mixing powdered milk into your regular milk and calling it fresh, homogenized milk. Because now they can use powdered milk, which triples the protein content. And protein causes cancer. And the nitrogen they put in the cow's milk causes cancer. And the xanthan oxidase, which causes heart attacks. Maybe I need to explain how this thing called the body works. See, it's very simple. See, the most stupid scientists are always into the health field. Because we know the arm is going to be over here on the shoulder. Once you learn it, you got it. No problem. You go into some other field, you got to keep learning stuff over and over again. I said, well, they got two eyes, more likely going to be on the face. I mean, after you learn these things, that's it. So I went into something that was kind of easy for me. So you know that if you're healthy and you're eating, certain things don't go together. Now, God puts certain things together. And then you go around, you're going to put certain things. No, Have you ever seen fish and cows together? White boy, he put fish liver oil in milk. He called it vitamin D enriched milk. Don't go together. That's causing some problems right there. Now, white boy, he wanted to make the foam. Remember, they started this additive stuff. They used to add red lead to the cheese to make it orange. They started this additive business because they're used to these chemicals in their food. They're trying to feel like you feel naturally. See, there's theobromine in chocolate, 3 drugs in chocolate. They didn't used to let white women eat chocolate because they thought that would make them too sexually aroused. See, there's drugs in chocolate. They're trying to stimulate their system. There's drugs in coffee, drugs in alcohol. They're trying to stimulate their system to make themselves feel like you feel naturally. And then you imitate them imitating you. It's crazy. Nonetheless, we're getting into this whole way of our body. It's a very simple process. You eat your food. You don't put things together. They don't go together. God didn't put that. Look, black people in Africa, white people are up there. So maybe we don't belong there. I don't know. We weren't put together. So maybe we don't belong together. But nonetheless, you say, wait a minute. Have I ever seen a can of Crisco growing beside potatoes? Let me see. So French fries is an illogical combination. Because you're going to put the potato in the oil and fry it, and then the digestive enzymes can't get to the potato to break it down so you can get the nutrients from it. Because you put oil around your food to stop your body from breaking it down. You put oil in the collard greens. You know how people just put the ham hock in the collard green, cook it for 3 days. People don't mean no harm. I don't want you to go out, learn something about nutrition and become like a born-again Jehovah's Witness. I don't want that. I want you to be, you got to be compassionate with people when you learn something about nutrition. Don't come at people like a ball of fire now. Just lighten up with this thing. My mother, she fixed me some greens, and I was, back in 70, 71, I was in this vegetarian thing. And she said, I fix you some vegetables, greens and everything. And so I said, yeah, you fixed them. I said, but what's this floating around on my kale here? She said, that was just a pig knuckle. I said, but Ma, I don't eat meat. She said, well, I took it out. She meant no harm, But look at it. Look at it. I was in her fridge, I didn't want to upset my mother. She had this white boy's arm in the refrigerator. So right away I got upset at that. So I said, Ma, what you doing with this Arm & Hammer baking soda in your refrigerator? She said, this is deodorant. I said, Ma, baking soda's a salt. When has salt been a deodorant? She said, they said it collects fumes. I said, Ma, this is salt. The white boy got this. You scared of that hammer on the box or something? You think the white boy gonna hit you? I just let it go. I said, okay, Ma, I'll get you another white boy to go with that white boy. I didn't argue with my mother because she still thinks she got that hook, that kind of thing. But no. People doing some weird things because you have to know about the body. You know that when you eat your food, you don't want to eat things that don't go together. You don't want to do that. You have never seen a grown bull drinking milk. Remember I was telling you about the hamburger that McDoo makes? Now, they put this lettuce on the burger, not for nutritional reasons. Do you remember this mythological characters, Adam and Eve? They had the little fig leaf over their penis and vagina? That's what the leaf symbolizes, that they put on the hamburger. It's all based on sexual stimulation. See, you're not getting it. You're not getting it. If you see, the next time you see a brother eat a hot dog and put mayonnaise on it, walk out the room like I do. Certain things, now wait, brother, do you know what you're doing? Y'all eat this hot dog. Man, please, this white boy got you. No. Some sexual symbolism is just obvious, but you just don't want to accept it for what it is. You just don't want to believe your slave master is just that crazy. But some of it's just out and out obvious. They used to say, a woman that was attractive was shaped like a Coca-Cola bottle. Because they make Coca-Cola bottles the shape of a woman. That's how they used to sell it, for God's sake. The shape of a Coca-Cola bottle is supposed to be a woman's shape. Look, they've been using sex to sell food. They got this little penis-shaped toothpaste in the tube, and then they squeeze the thing, and I said, oh my God, the toothpaste is ejaculating on the street. I know what they're doing. I know what they're doing. It's the symbolism of it all. You're missing the point. But the kids are not. They are not. They're becoming sexually attached to the food. And they're becoming attached to the food by sounds. Because sounds turn into chemicals, and chemicals are addicting. So now, when they hear, they can start at the beginning of this block and hear certain sounds. By the time they get to the corner, they want to hit somebody. And you wonder what's going on. You wonder what's going on. They're chemically addicted to the food, the hormones, the nitrates, the salt in it. Because we're not using our common sense anymore. Certain things don't go together. You cannot put them together and get away with this. Oil and water don't go together. Why are you frying a potato? It's water. Someone that takes basic biology can tell you water and oil don't mix. And there you go, mixing two things together that don't go together. First of all, cars run on oil. Now, you're a human being. What you gonna use the oil for? I see people chewing gum. You go down the street. I saw some chewing gum the other day, laying in the street. And I said, that chewing gum was there last year. A car ran over it. It's still there. A dog come by and piss on it. It's still there. It rains on it. It's still there. Chewing gum ain't going nowhere. And then you go eat this stuff. I don't understand it. I really don't. It's because we're orientated to food by some people who have superstitious connections to food and sexual connections to food. We got to start looking, just using some common sense. Now, the first time someone smokes a cigarette, they cough. See, your body rejects it in the first place. First time you drink some alcohol, oh, that burns. Your body tells you don't do it. Then your nose starts running. And then the contrary cures opposite. Medical doctors say, well, let me stop your nose from running. Let me give you a cough suppressant. What are they suppressing? The mucus in your system. So they're keeping the mucus in that your body's trying to throw out. You're trying to sweat under your arm, and they give you an antiperspirant to stop the mucus. God's trying to do one thing, and they're going the other way. Remember, anything that works on the mucosal tissue inhibits the action of the uterus and the prostrate. So antiperspirant is anti-uterus, anti-prostrate, because it's stopping the prostrate from secreting fluid. That's what it does. The prostrate gets a cold, the vagina gets a cold, and it throws out this mucus, and they call it leukorrhea. The penis gets a cold, they call it gonorrhea. You get a bump, it don't hurt, it's syphilis. If the bump hurts, it's herpes. Europeans just change the name based on the location, but it's the same disease. See, they don't treat arthritis of children. Then arthritis progresses and they get older and they say, now you got arthritis. Then they don't treat it anymore and it gets worse and they say, now you got lupus. See, every time the disease advances, they change the name, to change its prescription, to change the drug, to get the change out of your pocket. You start off your body trying to throw out the mucus, so you got a cold. The cold that lasts for 3 days is the flu. Same thing, you still got a cold. Now you got flu. Now you get a flu with a temperature. Now you got pneumonia. Then the cold lasted over a week. Now you got bronchitis. But it was still a cold. But every time they change the name, they change the drug and get you to buy some other stuff. And they got you believe, okay, all right, I caught a disease, right. Now catch healthy. No, it don't work. They come along with these weird things, and people be asking me things. I'm saying, now what degree of ignorance am I going to answer to this question? Okay, you got AIDS, right. They're going to use ELISA tests, And they're going to use the blood test, yeah. And then they're going to tell you that what shows positive for AIDS. Herpes will give you an AIDS positive, okay. Malaria will give you AIDS positive. TB will give you AIDS positive. If you're pregnant, you'll get AIDS positive. Cancer will give you AIDS positive. Arthritis will give you AIDS positive. Infection will give you AIDS positive. The flu vaccine will give you AIDS positive. Sperm in your body will give you AIDS positive. So they asked me, brother, can you tell me about this AIDS thing? I'm saying, right. What you want me to tell you? There's no new disease. They just keep changing the name. It's no new disease. You got the same two arms that your ancestors had 10 billion years ago. You get the same, you fall down, you hurt your leg. You get the same hurt. It's not a new hurt. But they tell people you got, for this severe pain, take extra strength Tylenol. Where did you get the severe from? And they be coming asking me these questions, and I'm standing back, I'm trying to, be scientific, but I'm really a Getanese, and I'm not to say anything. I'm trying to, and I'm trying to hold it back, and I answer the question as best I can. Brother, I got a cold. I said, yeah, you got a cold. I said, well, tell me the symptoms. Well, my nose is running, I got a headache, and I can't sleep at night. And I said, last time you had a bowel movement? Well, I usually have one a week. Okay. All right. See, but I have to remember to say something scientific. But you know what I want to say, brother, you full. That's what I want to say. If I'm saying something scientific, I said, well, maybe we got to get the mucus out of your system. And but really, I can break it down to them in 5 seconds. But you got to be professional and everything. So anyway. I don't want to overdo it with these things. I want to be able to answer some questions, because people usually have questions and things of that sort. And these slides really, overheads are really, some of them are quite interesting, especially when I try to explain how to handle hyperactive children. I had to explain these clowns here who started this whole thing. The father of all this racism. These are the guys that started all of this. Sometimes I talk about Marion Sims, who started hysterectomies. He used to experiment on African women without anesthesia. He used to take out the uterus. He's the one who invented hysterectomies. Used to buy the slaves at the refuse sale. You remember the refuse sale? And then you have the scramble sale, the 2-for-1. Buy 2 niggas for the price of 1. They used to buy the slaves at the refuge sale do the experimentation on for various things they want to use us for. Those are our ancestors who came over here. The chains may have disformed their arm or kind of bent their muscles, or some of them came over here blind because they didn't get enough vitamin C and their corneas dried up. So when they got off the ship, they would just sell them at a refuge sale. And then the ones that were further damaged, they put them all in a room, and that was a 2-for-1 sale. And as many slaves you could grab, you could buy for the price of 1. So they used to do some rotten things. And the recipes they have for cooking black women's vaginas and breasts, they're in some of the slave journals I've read, with the little basil and ginger they used to use for the breast, and then I think they used saffron and ginger for the penis. But most of the white women cooked them anyway, and they still do eat these things. I don't want to talk about that. But nonetheless, when you get into the history of this thing, you see that there hasn't been any change. They just give it a different name. They call it organ transplant. But when Mickey Mantle gets sick, where do they get all these livers from? We're still being used as refuge and scramble. They call it chemical experimentation. And we go in for these experiments, these tests. They test us for the insulin. They were given too high a dosage and causing insanity. They did that in Harlem. And then they use those other tests. Everyone knows about the syphilis test, but they're using a lot of tests in the hospitals in Baltimore and Atlanta. They used to test us with the chemicals they're using today, especially the African women. They used to use the African women to measure the pain for medicine. If you want to know how much pain a medicine can suppress, you use the African woman during labor. Just don't give her, that's how they measure the effectiveness of pain relief medicine on African women. Of course, they use African women's vagina today to make all vaccination and inoculation shots all over the world and transport Henrietta Lacks cells. And they use that to grow all the cultures for all the vaccination, Germany, France, America. There's a black woman's cancerous uterus they use for that. So even today, we're still being exploited and used as scrap, yes sir, for things.
Is there, I know that I was looking at a health, a herb company catalog the other day, and I noticed that one of the advertisements that had like for hair growth, they had these herb combinations and had placenta extract included in this.
Oh yeah, they've been using placenta
Can you
extract.
expound on that?
Oh yeah, they've been using placenta extract for face creams and things of that sort for quite some time.
But I know in the hospitals, that's what they don't allow sisters to take the placenta.
No, that's too expensive. That's too expensive. Because the placenta the placenta is like you have an egg, and that shell would be the placenta, and it helps transmit it converts melanin. That's what it is. A melanin converter. It converts one form of melanin into another. Melanin is like I used to describe it like a piano. It can change structure, but doesn't change function. So you have a piano and then you burn it, you know you can't play it anymore. But if it's melanin and you burn it, you can play the ashes because it's embedded in the memory of it now. The melanin feeds forward and feeds backwards and works anti-gravitational. So it's very good to get the placenta. It's very good to get the organs from young babies because they can very easily adapt. So they like to get the organs from young babies and the tissues from young babies, and especially the placenta because it helps make things adapt. So it's very valuable to use, and there's a lot of placenta recipes. The Europeans used to eat the placenta of the African women too. There are recipes for placentas as well. But that's part of that superstitious belief coming out of the placenta because they really didn't have any nutritional foundation for it until recently. I think that's probably coming under around 1870 when they really got into that part of the placenta kind of rituals. But what can you expect from those people? Someone that can come up with the idea of slavery is really kind of weird anyway, you know, when you really look at it. But we have been victims of their experimentation from time immemorial, and we still are, and we will continue to be as long as we're in their presence. And if we don't get the message, we're just going to perish. Because infertility is twice as high amongst African couples. Half of the African couples in this country cannot reproduce. And we just don't understand what's going on. We don't understand why 75% of the African women have fibroid tumors. We just don't understand that the attack is on population control. Rubbers stop population. Of course, the talcum powder in it causes disease and cancer. And of course, the little gel in there also causes, it mimics estrogen, which gets translated into another disease known as fibroid tumors and cysts. So that's in the prophylactic itself anyway. Then it gets absorbed back into the penis and it goes into the prostrate. So the prophylactics themselves cause the same diseases that you think you're trying to stop. But all this is known. They know what you call rubbers is dangerous anyway. But the objective is population control. Yes, sir.
You know, what you're saying I'm familiar with. What are we to do with this information? You're telling us you're very enlightening. What are we supposed to do with it? Just like you were talking about population control. The gentleman who wrote the bell curve. There's an organization that I think it's in New York that's active there now that's working on genocide. I was be skeptical when I hear things like genocide. But when I read about the guys who wrote the bell curve, this group who sort of the think tank that he was in, where he believed that basically black is basically inferior and that they need to be weeded out of the society. And when I read that, it was shocking to me because I was thinking, I used to kind of just bypass things like that and blow it off. But it's active today, this organization that thinks that it should be genocide because of the superiority of a certain culture that culture ain't us. My question is, what are we supposed to do with this knowledge? And, where do we go from here?
Oh, it's very simple. What the brother's alluding to is African people are inferior, which is called eugenics. The lady Spranger, who started Planned Parenthood, is also a believer in that, and that was the reason why she started it. The thing we have to understand about the Caucasian people is they're not going to change. You can sing, you can dance, you can march, you can do whatever you want, but you have to understand what Chancellor Williams tried to teach us, and what J. Rogers tried to teach us, and what Brother Henry Clark has been screaming about, and what Francis Cress Welsing tried to tell us, and what Dr. Bobby Wright has tried to tell us, that white people are mentally ill, and you don't get that, I'm sorry. They are mentally ill. White racism is a mental illness.
That's right.
And we don't like to use that term because we're so human. But white racism, they collectively have a mental illness by definition. According to Francis Cress Welsing, it's a mental illness. According to Bobby Wright, it's a mental illness, a psychopathic racial personality, as they call them. These people have a mental illness. And you cannot cure mental illness by marching and singing. You go to an insane asylum and try that. You cannot do that. I'm in the treatment business. I, unfortunately, used to treat white people. Is this Atlanta? Yeah, in Atlanta, at Georgia Baptist Medical Center. I was a psychiatric counselor for a psychiatric consortium. And I used to sit down with white people and try to make them realize the mistakes they had made in their life and try to adjust themselves to the difficulties in which they were having. And I used to complain to the psychiatrist I worked for, freaking. I said, look, man, like, why are you giving me all the leftovers? You're giving me the real crazy people. I get all the homosexual couples. I get people that think they're furniture and cry because you don't sit on them. I'm getting all this souped out crazy stuff, you know? And I talked to him about it. But he said, well, you're the best one we had for this. So I kind of got inside of white people's mind, unfortunately, and I saw the way it was made and how it was put together. They have self-hatred. They really hate themselves. That's why they were able to teach us to hate ourselves. But we have to understand that. And the way we have to do that, first of all, is reclaim the African diet. Because you can't be spiritual unless you're alive. And you can't be free unless you're alive. So first we got to claim our African diet based on the spirituality, our connection with the food, so we can be healthy enough to get out of the situation, because most of us are not nutritionally sound enough to deal with racism. Racism causes a drain of paradoxin, it drains of lysine, phenylalanine, it physically, chemically drains your body. So I try to get people aware that you got to do some nutritional self-defense against white racism. And the way to understand this thing is to, if you don't have this kind of understanding, you just say, wait a minute, maybe I don't understand the full scope of what Brother James wrote, Brother Georgie James, and I don't understand all of what Roger said and all of what Carter G. Woodson said. I don't understand, but they said one thing, that these people have something wrong with them. And you cannot teach when you should treat. And I do not treat white people. They come up to me and they ask, look, Brother, and they read my book and things. They really up on me. They know more about me. You know, they go, Brother Africa, can you, I got this problem here. Can you help me with it? And I say, look, I'm telling you the truth now. I just seem to have some bad luck with white people. They just seem to die within 2 weeks tops. I treated one with a hangnail and they died. 2 weeks, and I try to dissuade them from coming to me, but they say, well, I'll just take my chances, you know. I say I have bad luck with it. They just die on me for some reason, you know. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to, since we have such a nice audience here, you were naming the authors, but the young man who wants to know what can we do.
That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, but we need to read the Isaac's papers. Francis Cress Welsing doesn't read she tells you everything you can do.
Yeah.
And so we need to name the book that they need to read, because he may not be familiar with
I'll try to give you some of
Isaac's papers.
Isaac's papers. See, she gets into the symbolism. She tells you about the penis-shaped statues and how they relate to this sexual perversion I'm telling you about. And I'm just telling you about how it is in food, because that's my field. But she tells you how all this sexual stimulations in the way they build buildings and the way they make clothes. Have you ever wondered why they use homosexuals to design their clothes? Have you ever wondered why they use homosexuals to design their hair? See, that's the highest form of masculinity is homosexuality in European culture. The highest form of femininity is being a lesbian in European culture. But see, you don't understand the nature of these animals. because you're used to thinking about human beings. And that's the problem. So we have Francis Cress Welsing's book, I think it's called The ISIS Papers, and The Destruction of Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. We have the books, J. Rogers, all of his books. He has a series of Brother J. Rogers, you see, and then we have Diop, Brother Diop's book. And we have Bobby Wright's book, in which he talks about the psychopathic racial personality. He breaks it down. He's a psychologist. And we have Amos Wilson's books. We have a lot of people to give us information, but the problem is these folks came into the public schools and they educate our children. In 1950, 20% of the African Americans were illiterate. Now it's 60%. In 1996. So we're dealing with some illiteracy here, that people cannot read. They want to read but cannot read, and they see the word, they don't know how to even deal with the word. When you have people that are chemically addicted or chemically have been altered, they cannot concentrate. That requires focusing. They can't make the sequence of words. That's why a child play with a toy and they can't follow a sequence, and then they'll stop and break the toy, and you wonder why they're always breaking the toy, because they have a chemical disease. They can't follow sequence. That happens when you're born addicted to sugar or hormones. That's why they're breaking the toys. So we have to use other mediums to get into their system. So we use the videos, and some people use the books. And I have cartoon coming out like that sort of thing, to communicate to our children, because that's the only future we have. So I just mentioned a few of the books, but I just want to say the thing we have to get in our mind is Europeans are mentally ill. White supremacy is a mental illness, and you are not trained to treat this mental illness. They will not listen to a former slave. Forget that. They don't even listen to each other. Forget that.
Well, sir, isn't your book is a good guidance for a good diet? I mean, I've read your book from front to back, and I agree with a lot of things you had to put in there. And I think your own book is a good guideline for a good diet.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, I have a book called African Holistic Health, which will tell you about the junk food and
The best one I've read yet.
African Holistic Health, and I have another book called Nutricide, Nutritional Destruction of the Black Race. This up front tells you about the symbolism and all that stuff, and tells you how to get off addiction. And the one, when I just have 6 with me, it's coming back out. It should be back out no later than April the 1st, and I have treatment for homosexuality. A lot of people don't know you can treat that. People will call me up, I know the treatment, arsenic, you know. But there's actually a treatment for it, you know. So I put that in the book, because that's something we got from the Europeans, too. We didn't come on over there on these slave ships addicted to no pork and milk and sugar and lesbians and faggots. We didn't come over here like that. Yes, sir.
I recently heard Dick Gregory speak, talking about experimenting with blacks. I heard Dick Gregory speak about something like Atlanta child murders, and I saw him at Georgia State, so he was relating to Atlanta, about the Atlanta child murders and like the prostitutes that have been, sisters that have been murdered. He was saying that the Europeans are experimenting on black people for like head transplants because they want to become younger. They think that by placing their head on black bodies or using our organs, organ transplants, they'll become younger again. Do you know anything about that? So can you speak on it?
Oh, you're going back into, I showed you some of them white boys over there. This is old research. A lot of it was done under Hitler by Jews. I took a course with a Jew boy. He was teaching me how to change the electromagnetic chemistry of your brain. Something called electrotherapy that they do now with African people. They use what you call virtual reality. A cat that comes down over your head while you're sitting in a chair, and then we can change your electromagnetic force in your brain. I was taking something called genetics, biogenetics, with this Jew boy. The same guy who worked on the bell curve, I studied with the chemist who documented all of that. I studied with some very evil people, just to find out, what they're up to. But nonetheless, the thing is, what he's talking about is the benefits of melanin. As I mentioned before, the only thing is melanin, and they're learning how to stop cancer with melanin. They've been doing that for 20 years. Now they're synthetically producing the melanin. They sometimes use melanin from other animals, but not with good results. I used to bring melanin with me. I have a little bell just to show people what it looks like. They went, what does it look like? So I have some, but they have been experimenting with this for quite some time. And they used to use the, what was that? In South Africa, they used that. See, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations have been sponsoring that kind of research. And Hanes Underwear has been doing that. This Michael Jordas, whatever the name is. That organization sterilizes black girls that have an IQ under 80. Hanes Underwear sponsors that. There's so many organizations into this that is to stagger your imagination. This Gordon's Milk is into this, and Purina Chow, whatever it is, Purina, they're into it, and Eli Lilly and Monsanto. That's all in the book Nutricide that I talk about how they do this kind of research. They really don't have any intentions of having you anything other than a slave. Believe me. No intentions whatsoever, because we're too profitable. We're just too profitable. No one's trying to get rid of you. You're too profitable. You buy everything. You buy everything. You buy scented toilet paper as if your behind can smell it. I mean, I just wonder about these things that we buy. But it's very insidious and very dangerous. And our children are the ones that are losing on it. Because they used to try to get the sisters in the third trimester under some, they call it lactogen syndrome, which causes the brain cells not to be able to replicate themselves. So if they can damage the third trimester, they can just about change the genetic code of the race. So they try to get the sisters in that trimester to do some very stupid things like have sexual intercourse and things of that sort, which will damage the duplication of the cells of the children, because you're not supposed to have sexual intercourse when you are pregnant. Yes?
Yes, we have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Could you tell me what tampons go to the moment?
Oh, you mean that bleach? They use bleach, they use winterizers, deodorizers, and bleach, well, you know, bleach works by destroying melanin, that's how it works. So, what it basically does, it goes into the mucosal layer of the skin, which is governed by the pheomelanin, which is what you call the, you call it body, mind, and spirit, which is the spirit, and it causes the pineal gland to shrink. It causes the uterus aura to change. This is in Hindu science, because whatever the aura of the uterus is, like they found it like you have a wife and she has a baby by you, and then you get a divorce and she has a baby by another person. The aura is still there of yours. It will always be there. So what they're trying to do is change the aura of the vagina. And you can do that with these things that destroy the so-called ozone layer, like bleach. And they change that electromagnetic force, and it causes the spirit not to be able to attach. That's what basically it does. Aside from that, it reabsorbs tissue into the body that should be ejected. And it causes the muscle to get the wrong sensor response, which they call a cross-linkage response, which causes what they call arthritis, because it causes cross-linkage. It's like you get a response when you're walking. You're given the wrong response. See, if you have on high heels, your foot is in this position, like you have finished walking.
Right.
So the body is given the signal that I have just finished making a step. And so now you're standing like this all the time, and it causes a cross-linkage response. This sets up, well, basically trying to break the bond. So it sets up this ill bonding situation in the body. Now we're getting the cross-linkage. That's when you see something like a person, a child that has cross-linkage damage, they will see a kind old lady and hit her in the mouth. Because the linkage causes the response to go to the wrong center. It crisscrosses the charge. Like you'll do something very nice as a child and they act weird. You say, why are you acting like this? Don't you realize you're doing something nice? That's cross-linkage damage. Yeah.
And also, could you explain what the spicy foods do?
Oh, spicy foods. Oh, yes. Spicy foods support a, what you call, eating disorder. That's the basis of the spiciest food. Because no animal eats all these combinations of food at one time. You never find, a lion attack a deer, eat the deer, then eat some rabbit. He won't mix like that. He'll bite the deer, drink some water. He don't drink and eat at the same time. Animals don't do that. So what we're doing is giving the body too many different signals at one time, which decreases the body's ability to taste. Because when you're young, you have taste buds in your cheek. You know that. And then they transport you to the floor of your mouth and the back of your ear, what you call parotid taste buds. So you have 3 major taste centers. But when you chew fast, you only stimulate the taste centers around your tongue. So therefore, you're only stimulating your lower self. So if you chew more, it stimulates the other, what you call it holistically, it stimulates your system. So what happens with spicy foods is you're crossing signals in your body. And you can find out whether it's a food or not, because a food you can eat all day and it won't cause you any problems. So if you think salt is a food, then fix a bowl for breakfast with sugar on it and milk and eat it. Because it's a food. And the same thing with cayenne, because cayenne was brought into Africa. See, a lot of these foods are not indigenous to Africa. We just think they're African, but cayenne was brought in there along with coconuts and all these other things. So cayenne is an irritant. And most of the spices you call spices are irritants to speed up the digestive process when you're eating rotten food. Because the Europeans used to eat these rotten foods and they had to speed up the digestive with irritants. You see, like custard. Custard is when they used to bake meat with rotten apples. They used to call that custard. And that's where you get the custard from. All these things come out of them crossing things. So they would put spices in the beer. See, they didn't stop where you stopped. You put spice on the meat. They put spice, salt, pepper, sugar, ginger in beer. Salt, pepper, ginger in wine. Because they were unable to feel a response. Their system is so dead, they couldn't feel a response enough to digest the food.
So the same spicy, what does the spicy food do to the female organs?
They irritate the system. They irritate the mucosal lining. The body tries to eject them, and that speeds up the digestive juice. It's the same as taking a laxative. You take a laxative like Cascara Sagrada, rhubarb, or Senna, it irritates the colon. And the body tries to get rid of the laxative by secreting mucus. And secreting the mucus, it gets rid of the bowel movement. So now you're irritating the mucosal lining of the uterus and of the prostrate. And so the body's trying to get rid of it, and it secretes too much fluid, and it causes the organ to get dry and hard. And it loses flexibility, and therefore the prostrate cannot milk properly. And so when it gets, like it's used to holding this much water, now it's getting weaker, we can only hold this much water. So it reaches threshold too quick, and the guy has premature ejaculation. You see? So then the same thing happens to the uterus. It used to hold in this much fluid, and since it started dehydrating, getting hard, it can no longer hold enough fluid. So now it sloughs more, and it gets thicker. You get thicker, when you menstruate, it becomes thick, and you see that like that. That's coming because the uterus is beginning to deteriorate. Deterioration of the uterus happens like if you want to speed it up, you drink a beer and eat a Tylenol. That speeds up deterioration of the uterus and of the liver. Vinegar does the same thing. Vinegar will drop the cells too. Vinegar is an irritant, it's acidic acid. And so it does the same thing. So you get the same kind of response. But the main objective of taking the spices is to irritate the digestive system to force the body to get the food out quick. Especially when you're eating rotten food, like we're used to eating rotten food, like cheese is considered rotten food by our ancestors. But the Europeans eat all this rotten stuff, so we follow behind them eating all this rotten stuff. Everywhere they went, they named it where they went called barbarians. They have the coast, the port of Barbaricum in India, where the Europeans Greece used to use Arsenio, Egypt, and go to India, where they a dock that was called Barbaricum, because the Indians called them barbarians. So they call the port where they come barbarian. Everybody knew what they were doing was wrong. And then we stopped following these clowns, but they're not really clowns. It's just superstition. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of people that I've noticed in the last year or two that have bumps on their hands.
Oh, yeah.
Quite a few bumps, and it dries up, and then they have dry skin that can fill up, and it comes back. What exactly is that?
Well, traditionally bumps on the palm and the back of the hand and sole of foot are indications of venereal diseases. This is the beginning phase of venereal disease, like prostate cancer and things like that. That's the beginning phases. Usually you get the rash in the palm of the hands, the palm of the foot, or the back of the hand, that kind of thing. And then you cause what they call deterioration of the cells. You see those liver spots, that's cross-linkage that the white people have. They get that's the liver spots. That's when the cells can no longer hold their own constitution, so they just break. And when they break, the melanin comes into repair, and that's why they get those brown spots. So like when you get a cut, the melanin will come in and repair, and it gets dark. That's the melanin. Same thing happens with sound. When you hear an irritating sound, like the irritating sounds that come on a low-frequency radio station, all the black stations are low frequency, or from a vacuum cleaner, it causes the melanin to cluster in the ear, you see, because the melanin is coming to get rid of the waste every time. That's how you could gauge the effectiveness of the organ system by the Negritas line. You have this dark line that you see that some women have down their stomach, because that's where the system originates from. Then there's the dark line on the underside of the penis. And we used to gauge the vitality of the system by looking at the dark lines. Same way you gauge vitality, the man's system by the erection. If the erection is pointing down, then the system's getting weak. Because when you have a lot of vitality, the erections is pointing up. Like a little baby boy can pee in his face, because he still has a lot of vitality in the reproductive system. Then when it gets worse and worse and worse, the person's erection will point down to the ground, because the ding-dongs die. So it's the vitality of the system by this Negritas line kind of thing. And so that's in the palm of your hand is where the hand generates from. So you know it's the generative organs. You see, it's a very easy system to kind of understand, because everything follows like a sequence. The same sequence is always repeated over and over again in the body. It's like an egg. The lower part of my arm is attached down here to my hip. So this part of my arm is related to my lower system, and this is my middle and upper system. It just repeats itself. This was attached here. So my ankles is related to my prostrate and the women's fallopian tubes and uterus right here, because it was attached here. Then you have the middle system and upper system. So it repeats itself over and over again, even on the face, because the head was down like that and pulled up. So everything's kind of back on the head. But then you have the reproductive system. When the lips here swell, the lips down here swell. On the labia minora and labia majora, like your penis gets erect, the outside of the women's the lips get erect. The labia majora gets erect and it gets flat and pulled to the side in the labia minora. The small lips get erect and points out. The systems work the same. Once you study one of them, you got it. Because both of them are going to get erect, except for the outside of the male system is controlled by female hormones, and outside of the female system is controlled by male hormones. And like your sex organs are outside, they're the inside. Like the fallopian tubes go east and west, the man's going to go up north and south, the testicles go up and down. So it's north and south for us, east and west for them. That's why east and west is Isis and Nephthys, and north and south is Osiris and Set. You see, once you learn the story about Osiris and Isis and that thing, that explains the whole digestive system. I just use that story to explain the digestive system, nervous system, because it's the same process. Because you have the 12 halls of Osiris, you have 12 cranial nerves, you have 3 lunar cycles, you have 72 people, 72 parts of people that help cut up these parts of Osiris. See, that's related to the 12 cranial nerves. The whole system is based on that story. So basically when you teach that story, that's why I insist that people know the story, then I just teach the whole system. It's very easy to understand the human body. It breaks down in notes the same way. You have the same note B, the note A, the note G, you have F, E, D, and C. The body breaks down musically the same way, color the same way. So if you know music, you know nutrition. Because you can classify the foods by the vibratory force by the color. Anything that has purple in it is going to be female orientated. And see, you absorb all your color through purple. This is female up here. Your eyes is female. That's why they call it Isis, iris. See, our ancestors said, I'm going to tell you what this is. I'm going to show you how these foods go together. They paint it. This food goes with this food. And they paint it in the walls of the pyramids. And then we got people put that. I say, how can you, what's going on? They tell you, then they paint it. And you still don't get it. The system breaks down so simply. It's just remarkable how God is great. That's all I have to say. You know. Yes, sir. I'm going to go to this lady. Then okay, you first. No, the ladies first. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I would like to know, for a healthy black African woman, what would be the proper menstrual cycle? What would be, or is it normal? What, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? What's the problem?
Usually, so the proper menstruation cycle and ovulation cycle, we don't want to get those two confused, because most people confuse ovulation with menstruation when they're two different processes. Because you can menstruate every month and not ovulate. You know? I mean, it's two different processes, but a lot of people get them confused and think ovulation and menstruation are the same thing. They are not. So most of the time when a lady gets on a pretty good diet, menstruation can get down to 1 to 2 days in this country. Some other countries I've seen that just stop altogether. But it usually can get down to 1 to 2 days, 3 is the max. And then usually there's no discomfort with it at all.
Is it abnormal if you're not, say, bleeding, or, you know what I'm saying, or that, if the toxins and all that stuff isn't coming out all the time, that abnormal? Say it happens 3-4 times a year, whereas most people would have that heavy bleeding or whatever once a month. You know?
You are asking me a question of normalcy, and the normal menstruation in America is 7 days. That's usually how it runs. I'm saying when the diet has been changed, it gets down to 3 to 2 days, like that. So I'm going to using that as my standard of normal, because remembering that all the drugs for women were tested on men, so the standards for normal were set by the white man. It's set according to men. So I'm trying to translate what you're saying in a whole lot different kind of way. But nonetheless, I would say, so some people, when they ovulate, they switch from one tube to another. They ovulate on this tube and that tube. And some people ovulate on the one side for 3 months. And then they ovulate on this side for a month, and they'll switch back like that. Because you have to know the rhythm that this ovulation is occurring in. And of course you have to know the zodiac sign. That helps so people know the zodiac art. But there's a certain rhythm that's, like you hear out of one ear for 3 hours and you switch to the other for 3 hours. You hear dominantly from this ear and subdominant from this ear. You don't hear out both of the ears at the same volume anymore. See, that's why you hear one ear that's more forward than the other, because the sound cannot come to the ear at the same pace, or you won't know where it's coming from. So it got to come in a sequence. You got to have Osiris and Isis coming like that. So it's the same thing with the reproductive system. I have to know the sequence. That's what I'm trying to say. I know you're telling me about Osiris, but you're not telling me about Isis, because the women's system is set up by white men according to their standards. So I'm trying to translate a whole lot of stuff here. So that's why I was saying I had to know which side it's coming from, like that, to know the rhythm, to know the laws that it's following, whether it's coming under this Gemini factor, whether it's coming under another kind of sign there. But usually, if the child, there's a book, later one we mentioned books, Infancy in Uganda, that's Mary Ainsworth, and The Magical Child by Joseph Pierce. They tell you how black children grow when they are breastfed, and how they can sit up and know their name, the mother's name, and then repeat. It's in my book, Nutricide now. Infancy in Uganda by Mary Ainsworth. She's a white racist, slimy pig, and she's probably a lesbian like Hillary Clinton. Then we have The Magical Child by Joseph Pierce. Those books tell you how a black child grows according to black standards. But they're written by racists, so you know white people just tend to be racist. Even when they tend not to be racist, they tend to be racist. You know, it's just the way they're raised, the poor critters. So I would say those two books are the source there. But the natural kind of rhythm I'm talking about is when you're born, it's a male and female response. Because you smell your mother and you hear your father. And when you smell your mother, it causes the sound to go through your nose and vibrate back here on your third ventricle. And then you hear your father and it comes to this, what you call your ear ducts. And it causes your pineal gland to come into earth motion. The pineal gland swings. And that sets the pineal gland into earth motion. And the pineal gland sits over top of, it's directed towards what you call the Dogen star. The Dogen people call this the Sirius Times complex. Yeah. So you have this spin over your head, and that's pointing up to there, to where you come from. Our ancestors, they never said they came from the rat and the roach and all that. They always point up there. And the spin up here is on the anatomical center of the galaxy. It points right to the Dogen star. And it's right underneath the center of your pineal gland. That's why when someone's trying to think, they always spin down their head. That's why they think it's like this, because that has to be pointed up that way. They call that the silver cord. And the Hare Krishnas grow a plait there, and the Jews put a little cap over it. That's because that's the connection to the pineal gland. That's why they do that. They have to, because they're playing a spiritual game on us. Yes, sir.
Could you expound on how the Ritalin affects the development of children?
Can't hear you.
He wants to know how does Ritalin affect the development of children. That's your part of your question.
And
Yeah.
what can we do to counteract that with the school system?
Oh boy. Now, the school system. That's interesting. Now, first of all, we know that this white sugar causes a low response. So you can't give them all these jelly sandwiches in the morning, the Pop Farts and the, what's that other one people do? They fry this bread and put this syrup on it, then blame it on Aunt Jemima. That's another jelly sandwich. And these sugary breakfasts, because that causes hypoglycemia, low blood sugar, which means the brain is not getting enough energy. So they burn up this sugar in the morning. When they get to school, they don't have any energy, so they feel bored and disinterested. So there's no need of setting them up to be a failure by giving them the sugary breakfast. That's what I'm trying to say. Let's get that out of the way. Now, we know when you give any drug addict their drug of choice, they're chilled out and they're cool. Ritalin is a speed. You have just given a junkie the drug of his choice. So that's why they slow down when they get a speed. You wonder, I give them a speed, they should start speeding more. No, they have to. You got them high. You started off by getting them high with the white sugar. So it's very easy for them to go to the Ritalin, which is a class 2 narcotic, the same as cocaine. The problem with Ritalin is that it attacks the pineal gland, which it makes a sympathetic nervous system response. Let me get into this for a moment here. When you do something that's bad for your body says, I gotta fight back. And we call that fighting back, fight and flight, the sympathetic nervous system response. So when you're trying to haul it, and when you're trying to get away from trouble, you don't need to eat, so your digestive system shuts down. And you don't need to have sex, so your reproductive system shuts down. That's what causes the ladies to bodybuild to get small breasts, because their reproductive system shuts down, because they stimulate their sympathetic nervous system. The Ritalin stimulates the sympathetic nervous system because it views Ritalin as a toxic poison, which it is. And it's trying to poison the system, so the system tries to fight back, so it stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. When you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system, you need sugar to drive it, so the liver has to release the sugar to feed the brain and feed the system, which causes the liver